Thank you, Chair Peters, and thank you, Ranking Member Portman, for this hearing today. And thank you, Mr. Blunt, for being willing to come before the committee today. Cybersecurity is a collaborative effort, to be sure, and we need to work together to strengthen public and private cyber defenses. Mr. Blount, I was glad to see that U.S. authorities were able to deprive hackers of millions of dollars in expected ransom. However, I want to better understand your decision to pay the ransom, and I understand it was a difficult decision. As you've already discussed, the FBI and other federal agencies strongly discourage paying ransom because it incentivizes more people to become cyber criminals and to develop better ransomware tools. When you decided to pay the ransom, did you know how much of your network was affected at the time?
Thank you for that question, and good morning again.
Good morning.
No, we did not, and I think that's what a lot of people don't understand in these incidents, these attacks. It takes you days, basically, to see into your system that's been corrupted as to what you have, what's potentially been exfiltrated. In the case of Colonial, we had really good backups, is what I've been told by Mandiant, but it still took them days to get through those backups. So when we look at our response time and ability to bring the system back up, it was fairly good in reality. My concern was you don't have that view at all for days, and when you have a critical asset like this, you've got to focus on what is the best opportunity of options you have in front of you to take avail of. And in that case, it was to get the encryption tool and to get our information back.
Okay, so I wanted to follow up. You mentioned the federal agencies that you reached out to, but what, if any, outside of those agencies, non-federal entities, did you consult with? Were there private firms that you consulted with?
Yes, Senator, great question. Obviously, we talked to Mandiant.
Yeah.
We talked to Mandiant about that. We talked to our legal resources that have been involved in any number of cyber cases in the U.S. over the last couple of years. People that have had real-time experience with these criminals, as well as the specific science of cyber attacks and compromise. So yes, a lot of conversation went into that decision that I made.
Sure.
To negotiate.
Okay, and did you have a cybersecurity response plan in place prior to the attack? And if so, did it include any guidance about paying a ransom?
Senator, great question. What we have as a pipeline operator, and it would be not unique necessarily to us at Colonial, is we have an emergency response process.
Right.
And again, I've said earlier this morning, see the threat, contain the threat, remediate the threat, and restore. So in this case, you use the same process, but you use a different set of experts. So in this case, we reached out immediately to FBI because it was criminal.
Right.
We immediately reached out to legal resources that have dealt with this. We immediately reached out to Mandiant.
Right, but my question is, in your planning, did you have a plan for cybersecurity response that included guidance about ransomware?
Senator, specifically, no discussion about ransom and action to ransom.
And did your team do tabletop drills, for instance, to go through an actual simulated cyber attack before this happened?
Senator, yes, we do participate in those with various groups, as well as do them on our own at Colonial.
Okay. Some private sector companies can focus strictly on economics and perform traditional cost-benefit analyses without having to consider national security concerns. However, owners and operators of critical infrastructure, and I appreciate your comments this morning acknowledging that Colonial oversees critical infrastructure, that carries a heightened obligation and duty to be capable of delivering goods and services to citizens all, in this case, up and down the East Coast. Mr. Blount, Colonial Pipeline surely performed some number of cost-benefit analyses regarding the operation of its pipeline to determine how much to spend on pipeline hardware, personnel, and even cybersecurity. Did any of your analyses incorporate any public responsibility factors, such as the impact of a potential cyber attack on consumers or on the U.S. economy?
Senator, that's a great question. I wouldn't say that we approached it that way. We know our number one goal at Colonial is to safely and securely operate that pipeline because we've known for 57 years the importance of that pipeline to the well-being of the American citizen. So that's always been our focus. Our investment, whether it's in pipeline integrity,
Right.
or whether it's in cyberware and IT, is all derived around keeping safe and protecting the asset because of what its main benefit is to the United States.
Okay, I understand that, and I appreciate that answer. But, you know, as you've had conversations with other senators this morning, you've mentioned that you didn't have two-step authentication in place. You've mentioned a legacy VPN, which in my understanding means it was a pretty old VPN. So I don't think it's acceptable to understand the critical nature of your product, but then not really have the preparation and the system in place to protect it as if it's critical infrastructure. You really do have an obligation to U.S. communities that you serve and to consumers and to our national security. So I am concerned that it doesn't seem to have been a formal factor in your analysis of how much to strengthen your systems.
Senator, we take cybersecurity very seriously. I did reference earlier that the VPN was a legacy VPN.
Yep.
We could not see, and it did not show up in any pen testing. That's unfortunate. But again, the safety and security of the system is highly critical. We've never had our board deny us any funds associated with safety and security, whether it's on the IT side or the physical side of the pipe. If my CIO wants funds, she gets them.
Okay. I would just, and this is an issue that I think we're seeing across the board on cyber, we need to start imagining what can happen and respond accordingly as opposed to always be looking at what the last problem was, right? And really investing. And for critical infrastructure, I think it's absolutely important that we have standards that really make sure that companies are investing in the kind of infrastructure they need. I have another question. I am running out of time, so I'll submit it for the record, but I really would like to get your thoughts about what kind of information, public-private information sharing needs to happen, between and among whom and at what level, because I think that's another important piece to this whole issue. Thank you very much for being here this morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair.